So, the bases that I'm working on for my Custodes army have this marble and rustic earth type texture going on to them. You see here, we have sand and grit mixture, and we have our little secret ingredient through here to make our marbling a little bit easier for us. On some of these bases, we have some grass tufts, which is made out of some natural colored rope. Okay. The paints we're going to be using, this light buttermilk, then washed with Agrax Earthshade, followed up with a dry brushing of pallid wished flesh. The grit we're using is just a standard coarse grit you can get at Hobby Lobby or Michael's, anything kind of stores like that, and then just regular old construction sand. You'll also need some Elmer's glue or PVA type glue, and in order to glue down our secret ingredient, you need some super glue. The PVA glue didn't really work all that well, neither did like tacky glues or things of that nature, so super glue is the trick. Now, our secret ingredient is going to be countertop laminate samples. What we can do with this, the textures are already on it, has a wooden type backing. We can cut this down to any shape that we need to fit onto our bases. Down to a round size, broken up for our biker bases, or for the base that we're going to be working on today, a large dreadnought base. Alright guys, so we got our base we're going to work with, and I've gone ahead and I've laid out where I want my marble to be on our base. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay our base on top of our laminate sample, and I'm going to try to transfer this image roughly over to our laminate sample. I'm using a Sharpie marker, a fine tip, tracing out the edge of our sample, tracing out the edge of our sample on this side to ensure that we get a nice round fit. We'll have to come back and trim it up just to make sure it's nice and tight. And what we're going to do is try to simulate that rough edge that we want going through our base. Right now, it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and we're breaking marble here. All right, so with that laid out, what we're going to do, move this aside, and what we're going to get is some snips. Okay, these snips we can go in. We can cut this laminate. This is just a regular set of sprue cutters. You see how it just kind of chips away for us? Go around our drawing or our sketch for our sample and cut that out. Now, if it's a little rough, that's no real big deal, because again, we're going to be shooting for a broken marble look. Okay. Now, sometimes it doesn't want to cut along the line. It's because we're getting deep into the material. So if we take out little pieces, we can kind of guarantee a better cut. Okay. We're just going to work our way around the drawing until we're happy with the outcome. Now see there, I had a little chip come out. Again, no worry, because it's just a guide. Okay. I'm going to do this off camera for everybody, just for the sake of time. Okay. Be back in a minute. Alright, so now we got our piece of laminate cut out to the approximate shape that we want it. Lay it over our base, trying to get it about where we want it to be. And again, we see how we're overlapping just a little bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to hold it in place. Alright, about where we want it. We're going to flip it over so we can see that lip that we got showing through here. And with our Sharpie marker again, we're just going to go ahead and mark that line. Again, holding it in place, make sure it's not moving on us. Rotating over to the other side. I'm going to mark that edge again. Okay. Now, for this cut on the edge, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to cut it back, again, using our snips. If you have a good pair of scissors, that works out pretty well too. So, the scissors that I got here, maybe it'll come through, and we're going to try to take that line away, right? Because that marker line was on the outside, which means it was on the outside of our base, right? And then cut that back. Okay. Do the same thing for the other side. Working on our line. Okay, keeping it nice and clean. This is going to be the edge of our base. All right, and flip it over, take a look at what we got. Bring our base back in place. And now we got ourselves a nice, clean, fitting base there. All right. Now our next step will be to glue this guy down. All right. So I'll flip it over using our super glue. You don't have to cover the entirety of the base, but you do want to make sure we're walking around those edges. Okay. Come on, super glue. We can do it. There we go. I don't need a whole lot because super glue is fairly strong. Try to get a little bit there inside. And on the edges, we're going to have our PVA glue helping seal it down with our grit as well. Okay. Make sure our edges are nice and clean. Flip it over. Get our sides in place. And then give it a good press down. Okay, that super glue is moving around for us, spreading out. And then it'll set up. Okay. Next up, what we're going to do is get our PVA and an old brush. Brush you don't care about, brush you use for like terrain, basing, anything of that kind of nature. And we are going to spread out some of our Elmer's or PVA where we want our sand and grit to go down. Okay, and that should be enough there. Old brush, gonna run through, kind of push it around as we need it. Now one of the big tricks when we're trying to do a grit base is we want to put our larger grits down first. If we put our sand down first, there's not going to be enough room for our larger grit to sit down on. So big grit first. Okay. Got that spread out. Gonna grab that grit that we've been working with. I'm just gonna kind of lightly drop it, you know, let the gravity take it where it wants to go. Try to simulate little piles, right? And try to keep it where there's a flow of the grit across, a little bit heavier to a lighter. Help simulate that there's some broken marble that used to exist here. Okay. I'm gonna flip it over. I'm gonna spread out my PVA on the other side. Yes. And we're gonna do the same thing on this side. And I'm going to try to build up a little glue on this edge, be a little bit thicker, which will simulate more of that terrain coming down off that side. Make sure we're getting all the way to the edges. Make sure we're getting in there good and tight. Alright. I'll try to focus this a little bit heavier on this end. A little bit throughout the middle, a little heavier down on this end, just to give it some more character. Okay. Now, while that is setting up, we're going to grab our sand. It's going to be kind of a messy part. All right. Gently sprinkle our sand out over our base. Okay. Making sure we cover everything, getting it in places that we want it. I'm going to flip over to the other side. I'm going to do the same thing. All right, going to give that a couple seconds to set up and dry, and we'll be right back in a minute. Okay. All right, guys. So our base has enough time to dry. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start laying down our light buttermilk base paint. All right, that's going to give us our initial texture. It's going to look kind of stark to begin with, but that's where we're going to wash it down with our Agrax Earthshade. So with our ratty brush, get a little bit there, and just start dabbing it around our base. Okay, now we don't want it to be too thick. If the paint is too thick, it can obscure and kind of fill in our sand and won't give us the desired effect that we're looking for. So just keep moving the paint around. If you get any paint on the marble laminate sample, don't worry about it. It'll scrape off pretty easily with the edge of a blade. And I'll show you that once we're done with this basing step. So again, continue around, just dabbing that paint on, and try to be as neat as you can, because the neater you are now, the less cleanup we gotta do later. And what we'll try to do is just get this side done for us, and hold it up to the camera so you can see it a little bit better, see what exactly we're working with here. And it's a fairly quick process here. Keep working our way around our base, trying to keep an eye out for any pooling of that paint. Need that nice texture to come through. Now when I was putting down the PVA glue, I wasn't trying to get it nice and smooth. Some bumps and texture in that PVA actually translates through to the top of the sand, making it have a more natural appearance than the final product too. So when you're doing that PVA, it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. Just keep working it, little ridges and bumps. It'll be all right. Almost got this side done. And again, you can see how white it is compared to the edges we got of that marble, and also compared to our final product we got coming up too. That's the magic of washes. Washes are liquid talent. Okay, just about done. So got a little bit there on the edge of that base, but not to worry. All right, there we go. Hold that so you can see what we got going on. All right, and I'm gonna continue on to the other side. Okay, be back in a minute. All right, so we got both sides of our base with our light buttermilk. And remember how I said I got some stuff there on the edge? So we can do, let's get a blade out. Okay. And walking around the edge of the base, we can just find those little mistakes. Just kind of scrape them off to the side, right? And it's pretty easy. Just kind of walk it. And go a little bit through here. Kind of blowing it off as I go, right? Some extra sand kind of got up on my base there. And that's okay if you get sand up there. I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that some sand will get up onto your marble, especially on like a battlefield kind of situation. But for my look, I'm trying to go for a more clean. Okay. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and let this dry a little bit more before we start applying that wash. All right, I'll be back. All right, our base coat of paint has had a chance to get a good dry on it. Now our next step is going to be to apply that Agrax Earthshade wash. Okay, so get our Agrax ready, and just like with that base, we're gonna go around kind of dabbing it in place. Okay. Load up your brush, kind of just start walking around, okay? Now it's alright to be a little heavy with this. Alright, so we're trying to get all the little recesses, those little details to start popping. What we don't want to do is clog it up, kind of like in these areas here. So I'm just kind of move that around. Now, in those locations where we put down that larger grit, alright, it's okay to leave it a little thicker there because it'll kind of mimic shadows around those larger stones like that. Okay. Now this quick little wash around our base. Then we're going to let that dry, and then we can apply our little homemade tufts with our little rope that we got going on. So not exactly as dark here as I'd like. Let's go ahead and add a little bit now. Kind of darken that up. And again, those waves that we kind of left with that base layer of PVA, we can start to see that texture building up even more now with our wash applied. And leaving it a little thicker around those pebbles. Alright. Looks pretty good. Want it maybe a little darker through here. Kind of get that little valley there. A little darker through here. Alright. Pretty happy with that. Go ahead and switch over to the other side. And same thing. Again, the trick here, leaving it a little thicker around that larger grit that we were using. And let that wash show off the texture that we got building up. Okay. Look at that difference that a wash makes. Go from that stark off-white color to now looking like broken earth. Like there used to be stone and granite here, but it was blown out or broken or crushed by machines moving across it. Alright, got our first layer down. Try to build up those washes just a little bit through here. Got a low spot. We'll make that look a little darker. Get it up in those stones. That gentle transition from our dark spots out to our light spots. Okay, it's okay to have some smoother spots too, right? The more variation and texture that you can develop, the more intriguing the base will look. Okay, not too bad. Alright, pull it up so you can see it a little bit better. And now the weight begins. Let that wash get good and dry. Alright. Alright, now that our Agrax Earthshade has had a chance to dry, that's going to be our look we got right here. We need to brighten it up just a little bit to get it back up to our standard. Now with that, we're going to do a dry brush of our Pallid Witch Flesh. Okay, so the dry brush, you need to get your brush and on a cloth, make sure your brush is good and dry. Get any moisture out of there, make sure it's nice and clean. Okay. We load our brush with a little bit of paint. rub it off until just a little bit's coming. I usually just try to test on my finger to see how we're doing. And we kind of just want to go along our model, picking up those high points. Kind of bring some brightness back to that sand texture that we put in, waking it back up. All right. Just kind of calls attention to all that detail that we put into it. See, now you can see some ripples through here. Do the same thing for the other side. I'll load up my brush again. Dry it off. Give it a little test. About like that is where we want to be. Get back onto our base, catching those high points. All right. Now, usually in these larger areas, I like to do a more circular motion. As you can see on this side compared to that side, this circular motion helps break out any streaking you might see. All right, so if you notice over on this side, got some pretty heavy streaking through here. Easy enough to do is come through, build it up again with a few more circular patterns, and the streaks kind of blend in for us, right? And there you go, dry brushing done. So for the little grass tufts, it's pretty easy. What I typically use is just some natural colored rope, right? And you can cut off a little bit. This is enough to do an army, really. Kind of put this aside, and we'll break these strings down even more. And there we go. And this is what we're going to want. Kind of wake it up a little bit in there. Okay. I'm going to pinch off what I want lengthwise from a base. Pinch. And with our scissors, just going to cut that rope right through there. Okay. You want to make sure that it's nice and smooth. That way we know that all our little rope fibers are going to attach to our base. Okay. Then look at the other side. Try to break it up a little bit so it's not so rigid. Okay. And with our super glue, I'm going to apply a little bit to the edge of that little clump of rope fibers we just cut. And my favorite game, waiting on super glue. Okay. Little dot. And then we are going to find a spot somewhere on our base for that tuft to go. Thinking up in here is pretty good. Just kind of press it into place. And then with edge of our blade, what we can do is while that super glue is setting, we can kind of give it some shape. All right. Pretty good. Now these fibers that I got over here, kind of repinch them. Get the length that I want to work with, right? About like that's good. Go ahead and trim that back, making sure they're all nice and even. Right. Try to break up this end, make it look a little more natural, not so rigid. Get our super glue back out. Waiting on super glue. There we go. Get that little dot through there. Find a nice spot. Feeling over towards this edge, kind of near these rocks. Get that in place. Get our blade again. Kind of just chop into it, giving it some texture and some angle. Okay, we got some strays here. We kind of pull out, move around if we need to, and we can come back with our scissors and trim up too once that super glue's had a chance to set. I think that's going to be good for this one. All right. Another little thing that we can do if we're really worried about it, this tuft's moving on us, we can get ourselves some water. All right, and what we can do, get a little Elmer's or PVA glue, kind of wet it down. We can take this and we can kind of dab it in around our tufts. Okay, that just helps seal those tufts down. All right, I got that super glue underneath. I got that Elmer's, which will tend to wick in and around. And Elmer's dries pretty darn clear, and it tends to shrink just a little bit, so it's not going to mess with our texture too badly. All right. So, our last step is going to be cleaning up the edge of our base with whatever kind of color we want. Now, what I typically like to do is I'll use a black edge just so it matches in with the rest of my army. Okay. And for that, since it's just a base, just using some cheap acrylics from Hobby Lobby, Michaels, and kind of those stores. Okay. Now for this, we're going to want a little more control than that little ratty brush, so brush with a little better tip. Okay. Pick that base up and just start spinning around that base. All right. Now, where I have my laminate material, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring that black color up into that laminate just to give that edge a more blended color. Okay, trying to make sure we're good and smooth. Be reloading there. Okay, taking care of that edge. See, the nice part about this is it gives a good clean line around the base, and it makes our miniature stand out as though it were a piece on the battlefield. And with that, we have a finished large-scale marble base to go along with the rest of our custodian army. Well, if you liked that, please comment, share. If you got any questions, feel free to ask. And thank you guys for watching.